Hi guys, and welcome to another video where we take a look at existing handheld gimbals on the market and we see whether or not we can fit the all new GoPro Hero5 Black camera to them, whether they will fit straight on, whether or not they can retrofit. So on the bench here we have the Feiyu-Tech G4, one of the older gimbals in the Feiyu-Tech range at the moment. It has been superseded with the G4S, but we've already seen in other videos that won't actually take the Hero 5 camera, so irrelevant to see whether or not we can make this fit basically. Now, one thing that should be noted is the G4 was originally made purely for the Hero 4 camera on its own. It was only after they produced it that they then started giving an option of longer screws which would allow you to fit the camera with the backpack. Now, I for one personally had one of the earlier versions of these, which is sitting here. Now that definitely didn't cope too well with it. It would run it, it wouldn't have too much of a problem, but sometimes I'd find that the camera would flop down and then the stabilization wouldn't work, and sometimes the roll drift problem where the actual horizon would start drifting, that seemed to be more noticeable as well. So I'm not expecting great things with this, but we will try. In terms of physical fitment then, let's just take a look at the cradle. Same with pretty much all of these gimbals. The form factor, which is slightly larger on the Hero 5, is too big, so you can see, if I just get that nice and close, that there is just too much of a gap. These edges here, these side edges of the screen, they just bump into the frame, so that's not really going to be an option in terms of just a snug fit. One thing we could do, however, is if we push the bottom edge down into the cradle and leave the top edge hanging out, so there'll be a slight lean to the camera, that potentially might herald some results. Now, one problem that we've got with this particular model is that the thumb screws unfortunately will then impact the camera. So unlike some of the other gimbals that have found an alternate sort of way of mounting it, you can't use these thumb screws to support the actual camera. They do actually interact with it, and of course the angle that we'd put it on, that's going to cause problems as well, because the tip of this is going to be digging into the base of it. So we are reduced to just using good old-fashioned rubber bands, so let's just try and make that work. So off camera I'm just going to put the rubber bands on. And there you go, you can see that basically all I've done is I've used these little lumps on the back here and I've wrapped the rubber band around it, and that is now actually holding it relatively securely. There is a disadvantage with the other setups that there's kind of an element of support from the screws. There is an element of support on the bottom here because of this bottom bracket, but as you can see there is a slight lean on the camera, so you're going to have to adjust it. Now that might cause problems with the balance. Obviously there's quite a heavy lens fascia here, which you wouldn't normally get on a normal gimbal, so it's going to fall forwards. You can see the balance already is very much out, but we'll change angle, we'll give it a test, turn the gimbal on, see whether it see whether it has problems, and we'll go from there. Okay, so let's see whether the Feiyu-Tech G4 is capable of supporting the extra weight of the Hero 5 Black. You can see it's all mounted up here. I've got it in that leaning forward position, so a little bit iffy in terms of the fitment, I have to admit. Not particularly happy about how secure that is. It would probably be a case of I'd rotate it in the opposite direction so the lens is in the middle if I was going to do it, but let's just turn it on and see whether or not there are any signs of problems. So initialization is up, no problem there, and you can see instantaneously it's flopped to one side. Now if this is a balance issue, it will probably try and kick in again at some point, or it may just have decided not to try at all. No, it looks like it is completely died. Now there is still some resistance in that motor, so you can see it is actually turned on. A bit hard to see, but if I shadow that, there you go, it's tried to kick in again. So that's, yeah, and it's flopped over. So that is something that I have seen before. Again, that's one of the problems that I was witnessing, not quite as extreme as that, but when I was using the Hero 4 Black with the backpack, that I was having that problem. And I think unfortunately the G4, certainly the version that I've got at least, that is not coping too well with it. As you can see, that's going to fail pretty much every time it goes. Yep. It's not really making any major noises or grumblings from the motors, but it just seems that it's not capable of actually supporting it. If I were to give it a little bit of support myself, I'll just see. Yeah, So it may be a balance issue. It may be that a bit of counterweighting possibly on the right hand side that may possibly herald some results. But I think, to be honest, given the age of the gimbal, you know, it's not as a popular anyway. I think unfortunately we're probably asking a little bit too much of the old G4. So anyone who's thinking of buying a Hero 5 and you already have a G4, I would probably advise against it. It may just be the one that I've got, but I think from what we can see here, it's potentially going to cause you problems. So better waiting for a gimbal specifically designed for the Hero 5 before you spend any money.